So my Let's Not Meet encounter happened 7 years ago. I haven't really spoken about it since it happened, as I kind of just wanted to move on, and I was really unnerved by the whole experience. I was 25. I am female, and I was working a job as an admin assistant, office worker to tide me over and pay my bills until I eventually figured out what the career of my dream was. I was tired of the job. I'd been there about a year when this happened, and believe me, when the creepy shit went down, I was certainly incensed to get myself on a decent career path and the heck out of that place. So you understand my old workplace building, which will give you a clear picture of how this began. I worked in a somewhat old building with a few floors, and on each floor were numerous office spaces that were rented out by different companies. It was a pretty open plan building, some parts more dilapidated than others, and it was in serious need of refurbishment to bring it A, up to health and safety standards, and B, cosmetic standards for the general public. How the offices on my floor were set out meant that our small office, which only consisted of 4 to 5 workers on different days, was situated at the front of the building with access through the front and back of the building. But nobody really used the back. Our staff quarters, as we called them, the lunchroom, were situated at the back of the building, and being an older style building meant there was a long hall and lots of space between the office and the staff quarters. Staff quarters were used only for lunch breaks, and as we were such a small office, we all rotated our lunch breaks so that only one person was off for lunch in the lunchroom at a time. Nobody else really used the lunchroom, as they preferred to go out and get lunch from the nearby shops, but as I had a shorter lunch break, it was always me, alone in the lunchroom at the back of this old creepy-ass building by the rear entry point. Other parts of the building were now under refurbishment, so there was a lot of upheaval in certain spaces and areas, but we managed to retain ours as normal for a while, before building work was scheduled to begin on our floor. Bear in mind that the lunchroom was so far back from the main offices that nothing could be heard or seen that way. There were only 2 companies on the ground floor where I was situated. The other one was on the other side of the building and used the front entrance, but we rarely saw them and certainly didn't keep track of their staff members or clients, and there was no need for us to see who was going in and out. Anyways, I digress. I was sitting in the lunchroom one day eating, heater going as it was freezing, minding my own business when out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow quickly sweep past the door from the light underneath it. It wasn't unusual for new clients to be wandering around looking for a specific office they required. As we were on the ground floor, there was often a slew of stupid people wandering the corridors aimlessly looking for the office they required. We did have a code entry system on the front door and a telephone system, so you could press the office you needed to get into and it would call through, and they would let you in so people couldn't just walk in without being let in, if you get me. We also had a code for workers to use to get through the front door. As I said, the back door wasn't much used apart from the odd worker who had a set of keys for it, and it was completely unmonitored. I wasn't too startled even when the lunchroom door opened this particular day, and a smart-looking man put his head round, suited and booted and smelling like expensive cologne. I honestly was more embarrassed to see somebody as attractive peering in, as I was sat there with mayo splattered on my shirt and a mouthful of bread, looking in absolute state. But hey, I didn't usually see anyone back there, and I am a messy eater, I admit. "Can I help you?" I asked him, trying to clean myself up. He laughed and said I looked like the one who needed help, and I immediately laughed back, aware that he was still at the door and not imposing on me in any way. Yet, when I laughed along with him, he seemed to take that as an invitation to come right in and sit opposite me at the table. And to my surprise, he took some food out of his expensive-looking leather bag and started brazenly eating a sandwich. "Hey, I'm the HR manager for such and such company upstairs, and every time I go out to get my lunch, I always wonder who is sitting in here alone, so I thought I'd just have a look," he said, still eating and seemingly very calm and chilled. The weird thing about him was that he seemed so normal. Nothing about this guy made me worried. In fact, it was nice to have some company on my lunch break, as most of the time I just sat scrolling through creepy news articles on my phone. We carried on chatting, mostly about mundane stuff. I asked him about his job in the company upstairs, and he asked me about mine. I asked him about where he usually took his lunch breaks. Just normal small talk, but It felt more comfortable than that. This guy was super charming. He made me feel at ease. That part is the most chilling to me. I was totally at ease and unguarded. It became a pretty regular thing for him to join me in the lunchroom, and honestly, I was beginning to get a bit of a crush on this guy. He had a good job, was attractive, and was very charming and normal. I began looking forward to seeing him. Stupid, I know. A little attention from an attractive guy, but hey, I was single and not bad looking. So I figured, why couldn't I have a harmless little crush? He had told me his name was Alan, and honestly, I didn't intend to take it anywhere with him. I was totally happy single at the time, and I was getting some minor flirtations from him, but nothing that confirmed he had a crush on me too, or wanted to take it any further. He moaned about the building work taking place and how the whole upstairs offices were a mess. Their break rooms, etc., had all been gutted, and he was glad to have somewhere to eat his lunch that nobody else knew about from his office. Again, not your average creeper, I know. At this point, I didn't even think the guy was a creeper. Until one day, things took a turn. Alan stormed into the lunchroom one Thursday, and I swear, in his eyes, I saw the look of a caged animal. You know that crazy look. You know that restless and jittery and hyper look. It kind of says somebody isn't thinking straight at all. I immediately had my guard up a bit because I had never seen him like this before. It freaked me out the way he stormed into the room, slammed his bag down on the table, and started ranting about how his boss was a jerk and that he wished he could gut him like a fish. All while pacing around, running his hand through his hair, beads of sweat forming on his brow, and pure rage in his eyes. I'd always thought his eyes were so pretty before. They were a steely blue, but right now they looked darker and more imposing than ever. I tried really hard to pacify him and calm him down. I was repeatedly saying it would be alright and to calm down and let's just eat. And whatever had happened, I'm sure could be sorted out. He slumped down in a chair and I went over to him, kind of standing beside him but obviously over him, and I put my hand on his shoulder to console him. With that, he flew up and pushed me back against the wall. I was stunned and I couldn't speak. His body was pressed against me, and almost through his rage, he was in a trance-like state. After he pushed me back against the wall, he just stood there, his hands holding my wrist down by my side. Almost like he was taking some weird comfort from the fact that he had me up against the wall. He buried his face into my neck and I was frozen to the spot, like, what the heck is going on here? I always said I would never be one of those girls in an emergency or dangerous situations to freeze. But honestly, I had never been in this type of situation, and I could tell he was really volatile in this precise moment. I really didn't know what he was going to do, so I didn't want to risk pissing him off more and then have him attack me or something. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, his face buried in my neck, still holding my wrist quite forcefully, when all of a sudden, he licked my neck and said, "You smell nice." Yes, he actually licked my neck. Seemingly calmer, that's when I decided, nope, I am not standing here with this person who is clearly unstable, holding me up against a wall in anger, and then suddenly being all soft-spoken again and licking my neck in this weird predatory way. That's what it felt like to me right in that second. And I felt so stupid for starting to eat with this guy and not even question why he was coming to our lunchroom. I told him to get off me. I was leaving. At that point, I was prepared to take a beating. It shouldn't have been like that, but I honestly didn't know what his deal was. Was he crazy? Was he just emotional or upset? Was he trying to seduce me? Was he going to hurt me? I don't know. I realized I didn't even know this guy. We spent half an hour to an hour in each other's company, passing the lunch hour, but I didn't really know anything about him as a person. It had been a couple of weeks of lunches together, and I realized how short an amount of time that was to really have any idea about this person. He let go of my wrist, and then in the most sinister tone I'd ever heard, he said, "You always seem like you wanted it from me, you damn whore." Before I could respond, he grabbed his bag and stormed out of the lunchroom, and tears just sprung to my eyes. I cracked the door open to make sure he'd left, and I just sprinted back to the front of the building where my office was and told the guys in there everything that had just happened. They were absolutely fuming. They knew this guy had been hanging around me in the lunchroom, but as I'd always been comfortable with it and thought Alan was okay, nobody ever thought anything of it. They actually thought it was hilarious every day when I came back from lunch all tongue-tied after my encounter with attractive Alan, as they now referred to him. They insisted we march upstairs and put in a complaint as company. and I knew that even if I didn't agree, they would march up themselves to do it. Eventually, I agreed, after feeling shaky and vulnerable, but I knew I didn't want to have to face Alan after the incident in the lunchroom. I went up regardless, flanked by 2 guys I worked with, one of whom was my immediate boss. As we began explaining the situation, it was evident that something was wrong. The woman and the man from the upstairs company looked really confused when I explained about their HR manager, Alan, and what he had done. They explained that their HR manager was a female called Jules, and that I must have been mistaken because there was no Alan that worked in the company. We asked every single company in the building, and not one company had an Alan working for them and never had. We eventually came to the conclusion that Alan had been coming in every day for lunch, but with absolutely no idea why or what for. We also didn't know if he had the building code or a set of keys for the back, and we didn't know where he had initially come from. Unnoticed, wandering freely around the building. The locks were changed, the code was changed, and CCTV was installed, as it never had been before. Plus, security checks were put in place at the building after this incident, with everybody entering the building being monitored. I never ever saw Alan again, and I still to this day don't know why he was coming in the building every day, having lunch with me, pretending to be an office worker, and I don't know what happened that day when he flipped. So yeah, this isn't the usual creeper on Let's Not Meet, but Alan, let's never meet again. I'm back with another story from my childhood. I tried to add more details that I can remember since the last one got requests to be more specific. I was about 14 or 15 years old, walking back from one of my friend's house at around 10 p.m. on a school night. Trisha's father was a police dispatcher, and the small, medium town I grew up in didn't have much of a force to speak of. I could run to the station in 2 minutes flat, and the park I frequented was next to it. It was also the same building as the Justice Department. Between Trisha's house and my own was less than a mile. I was halfway there when I could see a car, a Ford of a dark color, slowly roll through an intersection in front of me. I knew it was a Ford because it looked like a normal unmarked police car. It stopped for a good 30 seconds in the middle of said intersection as I walked towards it. When I got to it, I sort of stopped. Not as much scared as I was plain confused. I walked around the back of it. The lights inside were turned off as well, and the dark shape in front of the seat sat very still. I kept my ears perked, listening to the sound of the car's tires inching across the gravel. I didn't want to turn, but I could hear the low purr of the engine behind me, following me ever so slowly. Now I was worried. But Dad didn't teach me to panic, especially for how close I was to the police station. I took a deep breath and broke into a full-on sprint across the road, passing through people's lawns and yards, and through an open lot until I could see the 2-lane road that cut our town in half. Across that road was the station. I didn't even want to look behind me again and see if the man was there, because I heard his car. No lights flooded the ground or the space around me. He still had them turned off. I kept running into the street. It was so late and there were no cars on the road. I pushed open the gate separating the park and the outside, flying through it. Breathing hurt. It was winter in the northeast and the cold was biting. When I reached the glass door of the city hall/police station, my heart fluttered. I was safe. It would be okay. I had to ring the bell to get the police to open the double-locked doors. As I did that, I heard a car pull in behind me into the parking lot. It was that same car, and who should step out of it but Trisha's dad, in his police dispatcher's uniform. "Honey, why did you run away from me? I was trying to get your attention. You left your cell phone out." He held it out, walking towards me, proving his good intentions. His smile was wide and it was supposed to be reassuring, but it chilled me. Nobody came to the door. I was alone with him still. When he got to me, I grabbed the cell phone and stuffed it into my back pocket. I remember the next thing that happened like it was yesterday. He had coffee on his breath and he smelled like cigarettes. Suddenly, he grabbed my arm and pinned me to the door behind him. "Didn't your," insert racial slur here, "daddy tell you to say thank you, pretty girl?" I was shocked. Not once have he ever spoken to me like that. They were from Kansas, but he'd never given any indication that he thought like this. "Didn't you hear me, girl?" He was inches from my face. his grin now a creepy, sadistic sneer. He used his thumb that pinned my arm to touch the side of my breast. The way he said "girl" still sends a cold shiver down my spine. I've been assaulted before, but Trisha's dad's way of saying "girl" still haunts me today. I'll hear it in my mind and want to shrink into nothingness, scream at it until it goes away and cry. And just as suddenly he let go and laughed. I didn't know until a police officer knocked on the glass door behind me. He was staring at Trisha's dad. "Problem, miss?" "No problem, officer. She just forgot her cell phone." Trisha's dad answered for me, his normal smile back on his face. He stepped away from me and let go, but I could still feel his hands on my arm. I don't remember what I did. Nod? Whimper? But I blanked on whatever happened until I got home and cried. Never even told my twin sister, Lexi, what went down. Ever since then, he looked at me in the creepiest way. He would do that sneer at me as soon as I walked into the door to their house. I'll never forget how awful that night made me feel. I didn't walk home alone again. Without a knife, I took from my dad's possessions at least. He's always been a creep and has caused a lot of issues with Trisha's mom and him. They're divorced now since this happened almost 10 years ago. Not only was this the beginning of my problems with him, but it was for Trisha too. She and I still keep in very close contact, and she updates me on her situations with them. Apparently he attempted to molest her several times with physical repercussions. She's a strong-willed, physically capable woman and handled herself well. She got the heck out of Dodge as soon as she turned 18. Thankfully, she's an adult now, far away from him, and hasn't seen him in several years. I hope she never does. Hello. First off, I'm very new to posting here, so please let me know if I need to correct anything. This just happened yesterday evening in a small mountain town about 40 minutes outside of the major city that my boyfriend and I live in. We had decided to reserve a jacuzzi at a hot springs resort, just to take some time to relax and enjoy getting out of the city for a few hours. We left the apartment around 6:30, to allow for traffic and make sure we made it to the resort by 8. We had a nice drive up, making conversation and flicking through songs. We arrived about half an hour ahead of schedule, so we decided to sit in the car and wait to check in. When we arrived, I was immediately met with a sense of unease. I didn't tell my boyfriend, but made a mental note of the feeling. I've learned not to brush those feelings off, so I made sure I was a bit more alert during our little trip. We checked in and got all set up in our jacuzzi. The way it was set up was very private, so there was fencing all around us and a door with a lock on it to get into the area. When I first walked in, I was overcome with the feeling that I had to get that door locked as soon as I could. I'm usually a safe person and would have done this anyway, but the feeling of the locked door being a necessity at that moment was rather uncanny. As the night progresses, the sky begins to darken, and my boyfriend and I are remarking on how beautiful the mountains and sky are at this time of the evening. We are making jokes about some crazy mountain man running out of the hills towards us, and I start cracking up. I'm mid-laugh when we hear someone jiggle the door to our jacuzzi area. I stop laughing, and I am immediately struck with a fight-or-flight sense of fear. Now, I've been startled before, but this was just different. I felt legitimately threatened by the energy that whoever was outside of that door was giving off. As the jiggling continued, my boyfriend called out, "Yo, you need something?" The person on the other side began to yank forcefully on the door now, and my boyfriend yelled out, "Hey." I've heard my boyfriend's voice when he gets upset or angry at someone, but this was different. This was the "you really don't want to mess with me" protective type of voice. The jiggling continued for a moment longer and then ceased completely. During this time, I had been about 15 feet away from my clothes, which contained my knife, and was 100% ready to dive for them if the person had broken through the locked door. Since we were only a few minutes away from our time being up anyway, we decided to get dressed as quickly as possible and just book it back to the car. The whole time we were getting ready, up until we drove out of the lot, I could feel somebody watching us. About 100 yards or so away from the resort, there was a park of mobile homes. From our tub, you could easily see these mobile homes if you stood up on the edge of the jacuzzi. That means that whoever was home and looking out their window could see you too. During the whole time we were there, I was the only one who stood up completely, so I'm the only one that anyone in the mobile homes would have seen. making it seem like I was all alone there, potentially. Later in the evening, my boyfriend and I were rehashing exactly what had happened and trying to figure out who the heck had tried to get into our jacuzzi. We figured if it had been resort staff, they would have made their presence known and asked to come inside. If it had been another customer and they tried the wrong door, we assumed they would have said something like, "Oh, sorry, wrong door." My boyfriend looked at me and said, "You know, you were the only one who stood up in the hot tub. And with the way it's positioned, somebody in that trailer could have easily been staring right at you." This honestly made my blood run cold for a moment because I knew he was right and I knew in my gut that's probably what happened. I'm a pretty small girl, about 5'5", and I look barely 18, even though I'm actually almost 23 and I weigh about 100 pounds. Overpowering me would be like taking candy from a baby. This realization, coupled with the fact that we both felt so disturbed and uneasy about the whole thing, made me realize whoever was trying to get in there did not have any good intentions. I've thought about sharing this story on Reddit before. The time and place never seemed right until I found this subreddit. I rarely ever think of this. I think I mostly blocked it out. I am female, and when I was 25, I was in a transition period of my life. I was divorcing my husband and moving back to my home state to figure stuff out. My aunt had a small 1,500 square foot, 1950s house in a quiet neighborhood. A doors that stick, squeaky wood floors type of place. She had moved out but couldn't commit to the sale. She was happy to let me live there for a bit. I lived in the house for about 5 months. This house was a single-story home, but it was on a hill, so if you went around the back of the house outside, you could walk through a door in a small basement of sorts that you could stand in. If you were in this small basement and continued to walk toward the front of the house, you would quickly be crouching and then crawling. It was a small concrete storage area, and it was under what was my bedroom. One thing I remember about this place was that it was creaky and not well insulated. The floors were creaky, and when you were down in the basement area, you could sort of see light coming through the cracks in the bedroom floorboards. I maybe went down there once, got creeped out, and left. It was around the back of the house, like I said, and I had no reason to even be back there. Being 25 and recently leaving my jerk husband, I will admit I had a few male suitors visit me in that house, in that creaky, uninsulated bedroom. So I get my dream job, and I am moving out of the house. I'm also moving out of the state. My aunt has one request of me, to turn the water off at the street before I leave. So right before I leave the house, I turn the water off at the street. I come back inside and turn on the tub faucet. No water. I have done my job. However, this is where fate steps in. I left the faucet turned on. Didn't think to turn it back off. I drive away to my new life. A few days later, my aunt calls. She's upset because the water company has called her to say there is an unusually high amount of water running at her home. I promised her that I turned the water off and told her about checking the tub, so I'm out of state. She's out of state. My mom gets recruited to go over and figure out what's going on. Well, come to find out, the neighbor's husband from next door had been kicked out. He was living in the little room under my bedroom. He had strung an electric cord over the fence from his house. He had clothes and a toothbrush. Guess he was bathing in our yard. And when I turned off the water, he went right back out to the street and turned it back on. He had been living right under my bedroom floorboards. I am tense just writing and remembering this. I never ever want to meet this guy. The thought of him right under my feet, listening to me in my bedroom, still gives me chills. March 14th, 2008. I was 7 years old, a junior in high school. I lived in a square-mile suburban town in Nassau County, which is one of the richest counties in America. Life there was very quiet. Not much goes on. I had been struggling with depression and couldn't focus on my schoolwork. I had a paper and a whole bunch of homework I hadn't done the night before, so I woke up at 7 a.m. and made my way downstairs to my mom's room to ask if I could sleep in, catch up on some schoolwork, and go to school late, and she said okay. I woke up around 10 a.m., later than I had anticipated. I walked downstairs, poured myself a bowl of cereal, and said good morning to my poodle. That's when I heard knocking on the door. At first it was regular, calm knocking. I I didn't think much of it, but didn't want to answer the door in my pajamas. I picked up the house phone and dialed my mom's phone number. She was at work as a church secretary. "Hey, Mom, are you expecting anybody at the house? Because somebody is knocking on the door." "No." "Could it be the cable guy?" "No?" "Okay, I won't answer it." After I hung up the phone, the knocking continued. It increased and started becoming more rapid and frantic. I peeked through the curtain and saw a bluish pickup truck outside my property, and a man standing at the door. He had a red hat on, a denim jacket, jeans and sneakers. No logos or uniform. I didn't get a good read on his face either. He kept knocking. At this point it was riling up my dog and he was barking on the top of the knocking. I swear, the knocking seemed to go on forever. I checked the locks on the doors to make sure they were secure. Then suddenly it stopped. Quiet. And I hear a creak, the sound of the side gate to my house. My pulse raced. Maybe it's the meter reader. I stood in a panic in the living room. The next thing I heard was shuffling coming from the bathroom. Could it be my cat playing with the shower curtain? I had to check. I walked down the hall and peered around the corner to see inside my bathroom. I'll never forget what I saw. The window in the shower was wide open. In the middle of my bright and sterile bathroom was a dark mess pouring in through the window, one leg at a time. Ah, shit. Do I run outside the front door? What if there are more men outside to chase me down? Side door? Too close to the bathroom. So I bolted up the stairs as carefully and silently as I could. I heard my dog barking incessantly, not in a panic, but excitement. Happiness. I closed my bedroom door behind me as quietly as possible. I didn't shut it all the way so as to not make any noise. Cell phone. I picked it up and wondered who would come quicker, 911 or my mom, who was at work less than a mile away. I dialed her number. In a whisper. "Mom, there's somebody in the house." The creak of his footsteps on the stairs. Shit, I had to think fast. I ducked underneath my desk. I could hear one step at a time as he slowly ascended the stairs. It was kind of like a movie. I quickly dialed 911. That's when my bedroom door slowly opened. His head peered around it to scan the room. That was it. He saw me. I dropped the phone before I could hit call and instinctively put my hands over my head as he rushed at me with a crowbar flying through the morning air. "Please don't hurt me," I said. "Don't scream, don't say anything." With a gloved hand, he struck me in the face, sending my glasses flying. Now I'm blind. Fell to the ground and squatted with my hands over my head. He took my cell phone. I was shaking and my mind was racing. I'm going to die, I thought. He dangled the crowbar over my neck. I could feel the iron tip graze the skin. He was standing over me. How much will this hurt? How long will it take? What will it feel like having a crowbar in my skull? My mom is on the way home. Not her too. This is it. I'm screwed. He rummaged through my things on my desk. Then there was silence. Is he still in the room? How many people are inside my house? I don't want to know. I heard the house getting trashed downstairs, and I could hear my dog jumping and barking at the invader or invaders, and I could hear them hushing him in a baby voice. Quiet again, for what felt like hours. I heard my name, and I was stunned and confused. Heard it again. My mom. I ran down the stairs. The front door was wide open. There she was in my living room. Bursted into tears and told her everything. I was still in a panic. Was he still in the house? Was he hiding? Called 911. They came and investigated. A pillowcase to stuff the items in. My iPod, speakers, a brand new camcorder, laptop, and leather jacket for disguise. Were the items missing? I spoke with a forensic artist. The cops drove me around the neighborhood to take a look at suspects they stopped on the street, but he was never caught. After everything was settled, I needed a shower. I cried when I had to scrub the tub of muddy footprints. My post-traumatic stress terrorized my life. I had to sleep in my mom's room. I kept a knife under my pillow. Everywhere I went, I thought I saw the man who robbed me, not only of my personal belongings, but also of my overall sense of safety. It didn't help when at school the principal made an announcement about the break-in on the loudspeaker. He told the entire building that I let my attacker in and referred to him as a gentleman. This twisted the story completely. So much so that a rumor went around school that my attacker assaulted me and that I liked it. A whole lot has happened since then, and now I'm much happier. but I still feel the effects of PTSD today. The scary thing here is that he was a landscaper. My family never had enough money for landscaping, but both of our neighbors did. Landscapers are given access to people's yards, sometimes when they're not home, and have plenty of time to scope out unlocked windows, access points, etc. You probably didn't expect anyone to be home because I didn't answer the door. The moral of the story is to always answer the door. Or if you don't feel safe answering the door, make a noise to signify that you're home, and of course, call the police first. I was looking for a story that I posted a while back, but I think I deleted it on accident. By far, this has one of the craziest and scariest moments of my life, and in light of recent events going on in my life, has resurfaced in my mind. I lived a pretty sheltered life as a child. I'm an only child, and as is sometimes the case with only children, I lived an extremely overprotected life. My mom drilled the stranger danger in my head since preschool and would always stress the importance of being safe. Never go into a bathroom by yourself. Never get into a stranger's car. Never drink from an open bottle. Always ask for permission. Always stay within adults' eyesight. I have to admit that half of the time it went in one ear and out the other. As a preteen, I thought I knew it all and hated the constant nagging. However, I get where she was coming from now. My mom was a recent widow and was adjusting to the role of mom and dad, trying to shield me from the horrors that I am only now beginning to see. We lived in an area that used to be a quaint little dairy town, but over the years had gone downhill and became crime-ridden. The dairy farm fell out of business, and in its place, they constructed homes. It wasn't a bad place to live, but it wasn't the best either. I grew up thinking it was a common occurrence to hear helicopters fly by, announcing that they were looking for somebody. The cross street from my house led to a park that was known for gang activity, where almost every weekend somebody would either be found dead or beaten up. But it was okay because we didn't live on that end of the street, I thought. We knew most of the neighbors, and if we didn't know them by name, we at least knew what they looked like. Despite it not being the best neighborhood, it was pretty quiet overall and we felt safe enough. By the time I was in 7th grade, I finally had gotten some freedoms. My best friend Tiffany and I would take turns spending the night at each other's houses, but most of the time she would come to mine. Tiffany had a little brother that would always pester us, and she liked coming over to my house because we could talk about boys without her little brother trying to eavesdrop. I think my mom preferred it that way too because she was much more lenient with us, knowing that we are safe at our house. She would even sometimes go on her daily walks and leave us home by ourselves for about an hour or so, and we loved this. I'm not sure what happened or what we did this particular day. Probably ate pizza, sat on my front porch, outside as the sun set, and listened to the radio at way too high of a volume. Perhaps this was even one of those nights my mom left us home alone for a while. I wish I could say I saw something out of the ordinary or felt uneasy, but I didn't. After it got dark, we retreated to my room. My room has 2 windows. One faces the backyard and the other faces the street. I like natural light as much as possible, so as usual, the blinds were open. Even though it was now dark outside, which meant people could see in but we couldn't see out, I still left them open. I was too lazy to climb onto my bed to close them and had a false sense of security, knowing there was a tall pine tree directly in front of my window. With the tree in front of the window, I felt protected, almost as if my mom were invisible to the outside world. As the night grew quieter, we decided to build a fort out of sheets and tell scary stories. By this time, it was really late at night, and my mom was fast asleep in her room. After the first story or two, I started to grow uneasy and got up to close the blinds. I was creeped out, thinking somebody could be lurking outside, peeking in, but figured it was all in my head because of the stories we were telling. We got through a couple more classic stories, like the Hook Killer and stuff. Started talking about true ghost stories, things that relatives claimed they saw or heard. Our eyes were watery, hearts pounding, and muscles clenched when suddenly there was loud, furious banging on my bedroom window. It wasn't a knock that grew into a series of louder knocks. It was like an angry one that you felt throughout your body. My heart was pounding in sync with each subsequent knock. I sat there frozen, not knowing what to do. My mind was frantically trying to make sense of the situation. It just didn't make sense that somebody would be knocking on my bedroom window so late at night. We have an iron gate that surrounds our house, and it's pretty loud. I was surprised that we didn't hear the gate open. Even then, the front door is 5 feet from the gate. Why didn't they knock at the door first? My room is all the way in the back and wasn't even the first window with the light on. You pass by 2 other windows before you get to mine. A million questions are running through my head, and my brain comes to the only possible conclusion. It's Tiffany's little brother trying to scare us. Yeah, because it makes sense that a 10-year-old boy walked over to my house in the middle of the night to scare us. In what felt like ages, but was probably only a matter of seconds, I finally came to the realization that it wasn't her little brother. The knocks continued. They were loud and angry, yet nobody was saying anything. We were both frozen in fear. I just wanted to stay hidden in the fort where I couldn't be seen. What if whoever was knocking was peeking in through the cracks in the blinds and watched me as I crawled out from under the sheets? The thought of that made my every muscle weak. Then silence. The knocking had stopped. I felt my body ease up a little bit. Maybe who was ever there had left, and, cue teenage brain, we decided to go investigate. My mom was blissfully unaware of what was going on, still fast asleep. We slid out of the fort and tiptoed down the hallway towards the front door. Adrenaline pumped through our bodies as we decided one of us would sneak to the front door and look out the peephole or window and see if we could see something. Neither one of us wanted to be the one to do it, but it was my house, so I volunteered. All the doors were locked and the windows had bars on them. I just had to be as quiet as possible. Beneath every step, I took the wood creaked and groaned. After a few minutes, I finally found myself standing at the front door. My whole torso felt numb as I inched my face closer to the peephole. Holding my breath, I look out and I suddenly feel hot and cold at the same time. I didn't know whether to keep looking out or slink back down. I think a little part of me had convinced myself that the porch would be empty that night, but instead, standing on my porch was an unfamiliar man. I had no idea who this man is, but he is standing awkwardly close to the door. Something about it just didn't seem right. What threw me off the most was that he was just pounding on my bedroom window 15 or so minutes ago, and now he was standing at the front door so calmly and quiet. It was as if the roaring avalanche had turned into a falling feather. With my stomach in my throat, I snuck back to the hallway where Tiffany was waiting for me. All I could say was, "There's a man out there." "Immediately," she says. "Go tell your mom." It wasn't a question, but a demand. We ran into her room and urgently told her, "Mom, someone's knocking." She must have sensed the urgency in my voice because she sprung up and told us to stay in her room with the door closed, and instructed us not to open the door no matter what happened. We stood behind that door for what seemed like ages, trying to listen. The front door was too far away, so all we heard was silence. Finally, we hear footsteps coming toward us. It was so quiet around us that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I about had a heart attack when my mom's bedroom door started swinging open. It was my mom. She told us not to worry about it and that the man was gone. This left me with a million questions, but she was very vague. What did he want? Nothing. Who was he? I don't know. She shooed us back to bed and we complied. The adrenaline had started to wear off and I was now exhausted. We didn't stay up and speculate or talk. That was it, and it was the end of the story. For now, at least. The next day, I was sitting in my room and heard my mom talking to someone. I have always been a very quiet kid. Even as a baby, people would often forget I was around. I'm quiet, but I hear everything. I stopped what I was doing, probably downloading music on Napster or something, and listened. My mom was telling her friend about the man. Apparently, she opened the door and through the screen asked the man if he needed any help. The man stammered as if trying to think up a story and introduced himself as the neighbor. He said that his mom was sick and he was going around asking for money to help buy her medicine. Concerned but also trying to poke holes at his story, my mom asked him what her name was in case my mom knew her. The guy didn't give her an answer, or gave a vague one and then pointed in a general direction, saying they lived at that house over there. My mom didn't buy it. She knew everybody that lived near us and she had never seen this man before. She probably should have just closed the door at this point and told him she didn't have any money on her, but she didn't want to make him mad. She didn't know if he was armed or dangerous and thought, Maybe he's just a junkie and will run off if I give him some cash. Luckily, she had fallen asleep in her clothes, so as she reached in her back pocket, she found $5. Change from the pizza we had ordered earlier. She unlocked the screen door and handed him the cash. The man started getting more aggressive and growls. "That's all you got?" Now, my mom is starting to sense something more sinister in the man. He's not just a junkie, or if he is, he's a very aggressive one. My mom then lies to him and quickly tells the man, "Yes, this is all I have. We live day to day here, and $5 is actually even more than I should spare, but your mom is sick and I feel bad. She definitely needed this money more than we do right now." Not satisfied by her answer, he continues to demand more cash. My mom realizes that this man is not taking no for an answer and begins to bluff. She tells him that she'll go get her husband. Maybe he has some cash on him. We really don't have any more cash, but maybe my husband has some on him. I would hate to leave a neighbor in need. Your mom must really need that medicine, Tim. At once, the man's demeanor changes as he mutters, "No, that's okay," and treks out of there. I don't know what would have happened if the man had called her on her bluff, but thinking a man was present scared the heck out of the guy enough to drive him away fast. I grew cold thinking that he probably thought Tiffany and I were home alone. He must have been watching us and was planning on breaking in. Cue teenage brain. Oh, well, he's gone. Gotta go download that Usher album. Disclaimer. I'm not sure if the following event was related, but due to its close proximity to the previous one, I think it's definitely worth mentioning. The following week, I was waiting for Tiffany's mom to pick me up to go to school. We lived 2 houses away, so they would always swing by for me in the morning. I usually would be done getting ready before they arrived, so I would head outside to the front yard and wait for them out there. Sometimes I would go climb a tree in the front and look for the bird eggs. Other times, I'd just search for 4-leaf clovers. I was walking around not paying attention to my surroundings when I heard what I can only describe as what I would imagine a gun with a silencer sounds like. A quiet little pew, followed by a loud noise, which I later realized was glass breaking. Stunned, I looked around. What the heck was that? All I saw was a white van drive by. I looked over at my neighbor's house and noticed that the window to their car was completely shattered. Shards of glass everywhere. I still didn't quite put 2 and 2 together until I saw the same white van drive by, the driver staring me down. I felt a sense of unease and wanted to run back inside. For some reason, though, I didn't. I had too much pride and didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing they scared me. Also, I thought if I ran inside, they would maybe think I was a snitch and would retaliate more. I played dumb as if I didn't notice anything, and they drove by again. And once more after that. Tried to not look at the van as it drove by, but each time it drove by, I could feel the driver's gaze on me. Soon after, Tiffany's mom came by and took me to school. I don't know if the man drove by a 4th time. Never told anyone about the van. Luckily, nothing ever happened after that. This happened to a friend of mine who lived in the same neighborhood as me when we were about 8 or 9 years old. My friend E and her family lived just a few houses down the street from mine. We lived in a neighborhood where almost everyone knew each other. The biggest worry we ever had was that some outsider would come into the neighborhood and cause trouble. Some people left their homes unlocked because we felt that safe. There was an incredibly nice family that lived directly across the street from E's house. A mom, a dad, a 16-year-old son, and their other mentally challenged son who was 22 years old. I'll call him Tim. Tim was always home because he wasn't employed due to his disability, but his parents were working full-time, and his brother had school. All day, every day, he would be outside waving and smiling at anyone who drove or walked by. Big smiles, showing all of his teeth and sometimes giggling, just out of the pure excitement and happiness of interacting with other people since he spent most of his time alone. He was not creepy per se. One day, E was sick and didn't go to school. Even though she was only about 8 or 9 years old, E was allowed to stay home sick by herself. Plus her mom was going to be home around 2 o'clock anyways, since she only worked part-time, and the neighborhood was safe enough. E locked all of the doors except the one that led into the garage. They used this as their front door because it was easier in those cookie-cutter homes to just open the garage, pull in, get out of the car, close the garage, and walk into their house through the unlocked door that led from the inside of the garage to the inside of their home. This is obviously not the safest way to protect your home from intruders, but we literally all did it, as if a flimsy garage door could keep anyone from getting into it if they wanted. The worst part is that they had an outside cat and kept the garage door cracked just enough for him to get inside for his food or shelter if he needed be. So he's asleep, feeling sick and with a fever. All the doors and windows are locked, except the door leading to the cracked garage door. Tim was bound to know she was home alone since he was outside the front of his house all the time. He wakes up to pounding on the front door. Startled, she walks downstairs and looks through the peephole. It's Tim. She cracks the door and he says something along the lines of how he notices everything and would guard her home since she's home alone. She said thanks, but there was no need to, and to have a good day. It was beautiful weather. He looked pissed. He got angry and said, "You think I can't do it because I'm dumb, but you watch and see because I'm not dumb." She said, "Sorry, and I didn't mean it like this, but I have to rest now." She dozed off and woke up to a noise downstairs in the kitchen, the room the door from the garage led into. She hadn't heard the garage door open, but she was sick, so she figured she was deep in sleep and just hadn't noticed. Completely disoriented from time, she looked over at the alarm clock. It was 10:20, way too early for her mom to be home. At that moment, she heard noises from downstairs again. She didn't call out. She had been sleeping in her parents' room and ran into their bathroom, slamming the door loudly. Then she remembered their bathroom door had no lock on it. The noise she made slamming the door alerted the intruder to where in the house she was at, and big footsteps started coming upstairs. She moved quickly and quietly to her parents' closet, which was on the other side of the big room. She closed the doors and hid behind some clothes, all the time thinking how somebody would have gotten inside. She remembered that the garage door was cracked for the cat, slightly but not close enough for a thin person to slip under. Tim walks into the bedroom. Tim is tall and thin. She can see him through the slatted closet doors. She saw that he was holding a knife and did everything she could to not scream. He quickly went to the master bedroom where she was just moments before. These cookie-cutter houses only had about 3 floor plan layouts, so it wasn't hard for him to find. He looked inside the bathroom and didn't see her, then started making loud throaty noises like somebody would if they were frustrated. While pacing the entire house, she stayed in the closet for hours, even after she heard him exit through the front door. She stayed until her mom got home. She was crying hysterically and told her mom what happened. Had she not been so upset and had one of their kitchen knives not been left by the front door, her mom might have blamed it on being delirious from a high fever, because nobody would expect him to do this. The police were called and an official report filed. I'm not sure if he had any charges pressed against him, because after she told me the story once, she refused to talk about it again. I overheard her parents a few times talking about the situation, with my own parents, but never heard what the consequences were. He was so traumatized she went to therapy afterward for several years, and still wouldn't talk to anyone about it because she didn't want to remember or relive the experience. We even moved into an apartment together years and years later for college purposes. She never talked about Tim. It was like he never existed, and I never asked. I noticed she always locked the front door, which she should, of course. Always locked the door that led to the patio/balcony, even though we were on the 7th level, and always locked her bedroom door, onto which she added an additional lock. And when she locked all of those doors and the windows, she always checked like 3 times. Every single time. I often wonder if there was more to the story than what he told me. We were kids after all, and sometimes kids don't know how to explain things they don't understand. It's terrifying to think about what his intentions were, and if he perhaps did find E, and something else happened. As horrifying as the experience must have been for her, he made a huge statement in the neighborhood for everyone to be more careful. I will always make sure everything is locked, and I don't ever want to meet you again, Tim. This story extends from 8th grade middle school to my freshman year in college. I'm 24 years old now, so this must have begun in 2008. I was raised in a Korean household with strong Christian beliefs. Every summer and winter, there would be a youth retreat where all the teens in our church would go to one big joint retreat with counselors, and teenagers from churches in and out of state. I met my best friend, Hannah, there. She was from Philly and had a pastor who was named Alan. After these retreats, everybody would add each other on Facebook and keep in touch. I remember a day or two after the '08 summer retreat, Pastor Alan would often reach out and ask how my walk with God was going since the retreat and if I ever needed someone to speak to. I could always confide in him. This didn't alarm me at the time because counselors would keep in touch all the time. I always kept our conversations brief considering the fact that I was shy and timid. Over the years, I'd always see Pastor Alan at retreats and was friendly with him. Nothing strange happened other than his persistence with keeping in touch with me on Facebook after retreats. I slowly stopped talking to him and eventually we didn't speak at all. But this is where it gets weird. One day, after our summer retreat in 2011, I got a friend request from a woman named Sumiko. I noticed we had a lot of mutual friends from the retreat, so I assumed she was a counselor there. She messaged me immediately after I accepted the request. She and I became quickly acquainted. At the time, I was 15 and she was everything I needed in an older sister. Although we never met, I let my naivety get to me and confided in her about my teenage girl troubles. After months in, I remember walking into church and asking one of my youth leaders if they met a Sumiko at the retreat. He said he never heard of her. I asked him if he could check the roster, and he did, only to find out there was no Sumiko on the list. That's when things started to get super eerie for me. I panicked and went home to block Sumi on my Facebook. I saw on her page that the only person who continued to tell her it was nice seeing her was Pastor Alan. Nobody else from the retreat seemed to really be interacting with her. It all started to freak me out. I blocked her and unfriended Pastor Alan. I remember no longer attending these church retreats. A few days later, I received an email telling me that Sumiko was going through a hard time because of me, and that the email is coming from the mental hospital that she was staying at. They told me it was all my fault. I was a junior in high school under high amounts of stress from SATs, and I deleted the email because I just wanted to forget about it all and focus on studying. Shortly after, I started to receive really unfriendly anonymous messages on my Tumblr. They would tell me that I was going to burn in hell for eternity if I continued to stray from God, and they continued all the way into my senior year in high school. I always deleted and ignored them, or I'd reply sarcastically and laugh at them with my friends. Eventually the messages faded and I didn't hear much from them anymore. In 2012, I got accepted to a close-by Christian college, and I moved into my dorm. My dorm floor decided to have a little icebreaker meeting to help us get comfortable. I met another Korean girl and we began talking about our similarities in our childhood, being raised Korean with Christian parents. I opened up to her about my encounter with Pastor Alan, and midway through the story, I saw her face slowly dropping and getting pale. She told me she had a very similar encounter with a pastor she knew, and that he seemed like it might be the same man working with the youth in an all-Korean church. I asked where she was from, and she replied with the same state that Pastor Alan was from. She then asked me if the name of the pastor was Alan. We had the same predator in our lives at the same age. I'm not sure where Alan is now, but I hope that he has not harmed any little Korean girls, or anyone for that matter. It's absolutely disgusting. He was borderline 60 years old when I was 14 to 15. It makes me sick knowing people prey on children in the most vulnerable ways. It ruined a lot of my perspective on Christianity as well. It's horrible to take something so spiritual and take advantage of a child with it. So, Pastor Alan, with a creepy young Asian girl fetish. Let's never meet again. Okay, so this just happened to me, female 28, and I'm sure I will not be able to sleep. My boyfriend is not answering the phone, and I need to get this out. My company organized an event for the clients and the staff at a luxury hotel. Everybody partied, and I got into my room an hour ago. It's 3:27 in the morning here. Like, I don't know, 15 minutes ago, a guy entered my room with a bottle of water. It woke me up. I was super scared. He says that somebody came from my room to order a bottle of sparkling water. Weird explanation. There is a minibar, and there is a corridor in the room before entering where I am in the bed. So basically I am half naked in my bed. He comes closer to me at the level of the table. apologizing for the inconvenience, but he is still there, and I kid you not, he starts talking to me, saying how he is going to be in trouble and stuff, and how someone called and he is so sorry, and the others got in the hotel super drunk, and it must have been a mistake. I swear he had been standing super close to my bed for 5 minutes, and I was so shocked. I was just saying, no, it's okay. I just got scared. Really, no problem. Just go. Well, he says he doesn't see me well and asks my name. Twice, he says. Well, so I guess I wish you a good night then. Then kisses me on the cheek, like we French do, but once again, I'm half naked in my bed, dead scared, and he is in a suit, all dressed. Literally, I don't even know what I could have done. He left after the longest minute saying how he was sorry and how he would appreciate that I don't tell anyone. And now the phone in the room just rang. I don't know if I should still be scared. Was he just confused by the mistake? I'm super scared, though I cannot think right now and my heart is racing. I need to have some rational feedback after this, really. Update 1. I am okay, by the way, 34 hours later. So, this is a story that happened to my mom's friends in Korea like 10 years ago. Every time I hear this story, I still get the chills. My mom's friend lived in an apartment complex in Seoul. She was a stay-at-home mother with a young daughter, and her husband worked during the days. One day, she was coming home from running errands with her daughter and got into the elevator in her building. When she got on, she noticed that there was a man wearing a cap and a yellow raincoat, and he kept his head low so that she couldn't really see his face. She immediately felt really uneasy and made her daughter stand to her side, furthest away from the man. What made her feel even more uncomfortable was that when she pressed the button for her floor, there was no other lit number. And on top of that, she noticed that she was carrying something wrapped inside newspaper close to his side. Things started to click in my mom's friend's head, and she started to panic and decided to take out her cell phone and pretend she was calling home to her husband, who was obviously really not at home and at work. She started saying things like, "Oh, I'm on the elevator and about to get off. Can you get the door for me?" And making it seem like her husband was waiting at home. When the elevator did reach her floor, I think she lived on like the 12th floor or something, she quickly got off and grabbed her daughter and started to walk as fast as she could to her apartment. She noticed that the man also got off on her floor and was slowly following her down the hallway. When my mom's friend got to her door, she started to bang on it and shout, "Hey, I'm home. Please open the door," and kind of pretended like he was coming to answer the door. Upon seeing this, the man in the yellow raincoat started to walk away back towards the elevator. When he seemed to be far away enough, my mom's friend quickly picked up her daughter and slid open the door's passcode thingy. This is usually how people get into their homes in Korea, and started to frantically punch in her key code. But the problem was that the buttons would make sounds, so the man knew that nobody was going to answer the door for her, and he turned around and started to run back towards her. My mom's friend at this point was practically screaming, and when she finally got her door to open, the first thing she did was throw her daughter in through the door. When she got in herself, she saw that the man was pretty much inches from the door, but she managed to shut it and lock it before he could wedge his hand or a weapon into the door. Afterwards, looking through the door's peephole, she saw that the man was walking away back towards the elevator. Several months later, my mom's friend was watching the news, and there was coverage of the capture of a serial killer named Yoo Young-chul, who used to kill a lot of prostitutes. She told my mom that she could never forget the dread she felt when she saw the too familiar yellow raincoat and hat that he was wearing when apprehended.